Hey guys, it's Lohpally here with another video, and today we're going to be going over 8.12 and the top 5 supports for this patch. But before we get into the listing itself, I first want to just introduce you to basically the primary thing that goes into this tier list, especially because there's a lot of shifting in power based on the 8.11 tier list versus the 8.12 one. The first one, as most people are very aware, is the allies shielding abilities and items. So if you didn't know, there were significant nerfs to the duration of pretty much all the shielding champions: Karma, Janna, Lulu, Orianna, etc. On top of that, most shielding healing support items such as Forbidden Idol and Ardent, Mikhail's, and Redemption all received significant nerfs to the healing shielding power. On top of this, also a huge important thing to note is that Athene's Unholy Grail has received a buff from 25% pre-mitigated damage to 35%. On top of that, a lot of shifts in what champions are being played is currently in it. So we'll be going over the top 5 champions now that we've introduced you to what's happened to this patch. So coming in at number 5 is actually a very new champion to the tier list. Kind of came away from Korean solo queue, which is Fiddlesticks. Now the reason why Fiddlesticks has started to come into play a lot of times is because of the fact that most other champions around him that are lane bullies have been nerfed significantly, and Fiddlesticks has started to come out through the way. One of the most important things that happened to Fiddlesticks that makes him a pretty good laner right now is the fact that your E, the silence ability, can bounce quite frequently and not ruin CS, as it has no bonus damage to minions in waves now, and it has a prioritization where it will not bounce to something it's already bounced to till it's bounced to something it hasn't. What that means is if you E the wave every time, it usually will at least bounce one time to a player, allowing you to always push and harass. Fiddlesticks has also come into play nowadays just because there's so many champions that are quite squishy that you just need to crowd control. And Fiddlesticks' point and click fear and silence combination is really good for this. On top of that, vision has kind of been on the lower downtrend, as it's a lot harder to get deeper vision down. And because of that, Fiddlesticks actually has a lot of kill pressure, especially in the early stage laning phase, once it hits level 6. So I've been a big fan of this champion. It's a lot of fun. And there's actually 2 different runes mastery setups that we will be looking over this time. So if you're in a game with a lot of assassin champions, then I recommend usually going for Aftershock. It sounds really weird to go Aftershock in a champion that is more mage-like, but it's really easy to activate as you just use your silence, and then it immediately gives you armor and MR. It's really great against a lot of assassins. If there's the enemy team has like Kha'Zix, Zed, Rengar, etc., which are very prevalent champions currently right now, and also one of the reasons why there's such a huge shift in the tier list from the earlier tier list. And because of this, it just allows you to be super tanky and really hard to kill at all stages of the game. Really like this setup. It's been my preferable setup over the other one, which we'll show you a little bit later. And then on the first tree, we definitely go bone plating just to be as tanky as possible. And then if you need the extra HP in lane, then you can go Chrysalis. But if you are more focused on grouping and you may not need the extra health for Chrysalis early, conditioning is not a bad secondary in that case. After that, the third tree is no competition, Revitalize, since you drain health. You need to heal as much as possible, and this goes really well with all of your kit. After that, I've been going Sorcery secondary, and using the Nimbus Cloak actually makes it really easy for you to always be on top of the enemy player, giving you 100 movement speed. Plus, if you're in situations where maybe your ultimate doesn't quite put you on top of someone, you can R and then spam Fear on someone and get that extra 100 movement speed to get on top of them. And then we go Scorch as secondary for the most part. And the reason for this is you're usually just spamming your Dark Wind, which is your E, on the minion wave, trying to get harassed as much as you can in your Spell Thief. Scorch just goes well with this for the laning phase. And nothing else in the tree feels that great right now. The other setup that you can run, haven't been as big of a fan of this, is going Sorcery and getting Airy. Once again, on the top tree, we'd be getting Nimbus Cloak. And since the changes to Celerity, I'd recommend definitely going Transcendence in that tree, and then Scorch once again. Then the secondary tree is mostly up to you depending on your circumstances for your lane. You can go Domination and get Ultimate Hunter and Cheap Shot if you want a little bit more damage. If you build Penetration, then you can get Sudden Impact instead of Cheap Shot. Another setup that you can run is if you just want to be tanky in lane because maybe you're concerned about dying, but you want a little bit more damage via area for harass and just make it hard for them to kill you. Then you can go bone plating and chrysalis once again for the resolve tree. Outside of that, I haven't been too big a fan of any of the setups. As I already stated, I much prefer the Aftershock setup, but this is not a bad secondary one if you want to maybe go a little bit harder in the AP tree and get a bit more harass. So, jumping into the itemizations for Fiddlesticks, I think most people would agree that Zhonya's is core no matter what. Just allows you to make sure that you're really tanky, you have some AP, and you have the ability to stasis in case you ulti in and they start turning on you and doing damage. This is just a really well-budgeted item for the champion. Gives you CDR, AP, some armor. Been a big fan of this item in general, and it's usually what I build first in most cases where I might be concerned about them turning and killing me. After that, it's mostly a deviation depending on what you care more about. If you care mostly about damage, then getting Void Staff is actually usually a second best bet. For how inexpensive it actually is compared to like a Death Cap or something like that, it's going to give you a lot of bang for your buck and keep you on curve, especially if they're building any MR, and it's still good even if no one builds any MR. Outside of that, I've been a big fan of Shurelya's on this champion. I just like having the access to the movement speed in case maybe I have to ulti really far and I maybe don't have flash up. Gives me a lot more options in that regard, and it also allows, if I use Shurelya's, to help my teammates get into the fight when I'm ulting over walls. Outside of that, really doesn't matter too much what you end up building. I've seen some people get Leandries like 3rd or 4th item. Some people like Proto Belt on the champion too. Those are all fine builds. Just make sure that you get your Zhonya's first, and then if you're going for damage, probably want to Void Staff after that. I have also experimented with and kind of liked like more tanky-ish builds, so maybe a Zhonya's and then a Zeke's, and then a Shurelya's or on some kind of line if there's a lot of damage dealers that are going to one-shot you and you feel like you need to be tankier, need more health, that etc., etc. It's not a bad option. Rylai's can be okay too. Just make sure that you get your Zhonya's first is primarily the most important part of this champion. So, coming in at number 4, I think now that the dust has settled on this champion, people have gotten a lot better at it. I feel like I've gotten a lot better at it, and I am a lot more familiar with how I want to run setups. So, jumping into number 4 is actually Pike. This champion started to feel a lot better just from, just time into it. It feels a lot better to play the champion because I am more familiar with how I want to play it. It's also really good just because most people just aren't picking tanks. And it's really easy for you with, 3 to 4 to 5 damage dealers on both sides of the team to get execute resets, which is primarily the most important part of this champion. Is your team needs to have enough damage from your setup to then set up executes for you to reset on. And then if you do, then the champion does well. And the reason why it does well right now, everyone's just squishy and blows each other up really, really easily. I also like this champion just because I don't feel like I actually need to use the E to stun people quite frequently. So it's actually been a lot of fun to just have a dash on support and be a lot harder to kill. So jumping into the runes for this champion, I have hard settled on Aftershock. I don't run Domination at all. I don't run Electrocute at all. I feel like it sounded great in concept, but in practicality, it's just really not that great to trade away your ability to be super tanky via Aftershock. Aftershock procs off of not only your stun from your E, but it also procs off of your Q hook. So it's just really easy to proc, really good, makes you tanky. Champion has the best base health in the game because he doesn't get any health from items. So been a big fan of this setup. So after that, won the first tree, just taking bone plating. Then after that, if you feel like you want a little extra damage, Chrysalis is okay, but I've been mostly running conditioning. Second wind's also not too bad if the enemy laner has a lot of poke. Because you take a lot of damage and get really low before your passive starts happening, second wind actually kicks in and makes you heal a lot more than you think because it's damage based on your missing health. So if there is a lot of poke in your lane, second wind is still a good thing to run, even though technically the passive handles a lot of the poke. And then after that, I've mostly just been taking unflinching. And then I've kind of stolen this, and I've really liked this setup. Is actually running Precision Secondary with Triumph and Legend Tenacity. This means that if there's literally any CC in the game, I almost always have max Tenacity via Unflinching and the Legend. I really like this setup a lot. It gives you a lot cleaner auto attacks too, just in general for comboing spells. And then Triumph, because your champion wants to get in there and get resets, Triumph kind of handles your HP and gives you a ton of extra gold too, which I've actually noticed a lot in the games that I've been playing. So that's been like my secondary. If you're looking for a bit more damage, less utility, then the Domination Tree is not bad. You can run something like Cheap Shot and Ultimate Hunter, or Cheap Shot and Zombie Ward, depending on your preferences. Or you can run Inspiration, but I haven't been too big of a fan of it since finding out about the Precision setup. And for Inspiration, I would just go something like Biscuits, and Cosmic Insight is probably not too bad in that sense. But it's not what I run. I pretty much exclusively run Precision in that. I just wanted to let everyone know the other options. So when it comes to itemization, actually starting items on this champion are much different than most champions that I do. I have fallen in love with going Sweeper level 1 because then you can control the bush, throw hooks from Fog of War really easily, and it also allows me to proc my passive a lot more frequently. So I've been starting Sweeper level 1. It's probably the only champion I start Sweeper on, just because it's also a really safe champion in the sense that you can dash away or movement speed away. Like, it's a lot harder to die to ganks, so the vision doesn't matter as much as the vision denial to me. On top of that, I have 100% settled on Coin. I think Coin is infinitely better than Relic. It makes you more money. It'll give you mana regen for when you're standing around or if you're in lane. And overall, the gold from Relic is pretty low. And on top of that, you get 10% CDR at the level 2 Nomad's Medallion, whereas you need to invest another, 950, 1300 gold or something like that into getting the tier 3 relic, tier 3 relic for your 10% CDR. So it's just not worth it. Not a fan at all. The numbers for the extra AD you get is like 3 or something like that at level 1. It's not worth it. Much better to go Coin pretty much in every way, shape, and form on this champion. Alright, so now that we've tackled the starting stuff, because it's a little bit different than most champions. My build has just always been Mobies and Black Cleaver. I've literally just fallen in love with this. I've had some people suggest Frozen Heart or Frozen Mallet, or Frozen Heart or Frozen Iceborne Gauntlet. Not a fan of either of these. The reason for that is that neither one of those items gives you AD, and especially with a couple of the tweaks on the champion, his bonus AD ratio on his ulti and his E have gone up a little bit. And Black Cleaver, since it has AD, CDR, and health that turns into AD, I think it's just much better to build this item in general. It doesn't matter that you can't proc the debuff very easily. It's mostly just a stat stick for you in every way, shape, and form. After that, your deviation is all over the place. If you need just armor, you can either go Zeke's to round out your 40% CDR, or I've been a really big fan of Deadman's Plate lately. I like the bonus movement speed. Being able to walk up and auto attack and debuff someone, so it's really easy to hit hooks, is really good. And it just generally covers like a lot of my armor situations. If I need really immediate MR, let's use the example of an Echo, Katarina, or maybe they just have a ton of AoE magic damage, Ma is super good as your 40% CDR item. Outside of that, I've been a really big fan of third or fourth item Gargoyle Stoneplate, because you can proc this and then it gives you HP, which then there's some weird conversion where like you build it, you proc it in the middle of people, you get bonus HP, then it causes bonus AD, which then causes your ultimate thresholds to be really, really good. Big fan of this as like a third or fourth item. Covers both armor and MR, so it's really cost efficient in that regard. Doesn't have any HP on it. I like it a lot. Especially because your ultimate is not damage, it just needs to be an HP threshold, so it doesn't matter that you reduce your damage when you use this. Outside of that, a couple other options are like Merc Scimitar if you're getting CC'd too much, which I haven't ever really encountered, but I just say just cause, or Guardian Angel is really great too for itemization. But outside of that, I haven't built any armor pen. I haven't built Edge of Night, Dusk Blade, Yomu's Ghost Blade. Haven't felt like these items are really that great. you really just need the bonus AD for your ultimate. I don't think it matters that much how much your Q and E do in terms of damage. In fact, most of the time I end up not even using my E except for escapes a lot of the time. Anyway, that covers Pike for now. Really like this champion. I've been having a lot more fun now that I actually feel comfortable on it. So with time, it came that the champion feels pretty good. After that, we jump into number 3, which is Morgana. Morgana's kind of just been a staple pick, been on the tier list a lot. You can't go wrong with up to a 3-second snare, plus her black shield didn't get nerfed at all. So her black shield still stays up for the length of time that it already did. She's just always had like reasonably good utility, and since the mana regen alterations, she doesn't have any mana problems either. She also procs Spell Thief super easily, so she just feels very stably good. If you hit bindings, you'll feel great on this champion. If you miss bindings, you'll feel bad on her, but her carry potential is really, really high, especially since everyone, like I said, is doing a ton of damage to each other, and usually isn't too tanky. One binding usually gets you a kill nowadays, or it shuts down people from killing your teammate. So yeah, she comes in at number 3. For rune setup, she's a pretty basic and generic one. We just go sorcery, and then we get our hands on Airy. Once again, procs from pool. Not really any discussion there. Some people have suggested Nimbus Cloak. You can go it if you personally prefer, but I've just been going Mana Flow. I want to be able to spam my spells, not have mana constraints. It's really easy to proc. Big fan of Mana Flow still, but I know some people have mentioned Nimbus. After that, if you didn't know, Celerity got nerfed from 3% movement speed to 1.5, so it's just an untakeable setup right now. If you want to build maybe Sorcerer Shoes and then like Athene's Shurilias, so you don't have 40% CDR, then Transcendence is probably going to be what you want. If you're more of a person that prefers to go like Lucidity Boots or something like that, then Absolute Focus is going to be better. But generally, you're probably going to find yourself taking Transcendence now on a lot of supports, which sucks, by the way. But just to round out your CDR. After that, we go Scorch once again, and then I've been a big fan still of running Resolve with Bone Plating and Chrysalis. Nothing's really changed there, kind of the generic setup. For runes, it just hasn't really changed for her at all. After that, going into itemization, like I pointed out, Athene's did get buffed. So now, if you want to just deal damage, then Athene's is a really good first item. It's really easy to proc. I mean, you just use your binding or your pool, and you're going to be stacking up stuff. And then whenever you black shield someone, you'll just immediately heal them. On top of that, after you get Athene's, then I recommend, I've been a big fan of Shurilias. And then maybe like a 3rd or 4th item, you can go Zonias and start stacking some damage. Maybe you get Void Staff afterwards. Really, the primary core 3 is just Zonias, Shurilias, and Athene's. It just depends on what is more important to you in that game. Are you getting focused a lot? Maybe you can't survive any other way. Then maybe maybe Zonias is what you need first. Does your team need to be able to kite out, or maybe needs help engaging? Shurilias is really good. If neither of those apply, maybe you're just hitting bindings and you're winning the game and you have good vision control, then Athene's is going to be good. And then you just want to get all of those 3 like in whatever order you want. Also, Rylai's isn't a bad like 4th final item too if you care less about damage, just because you can pull and slow people down a lot. It makes it a lot easier to hit bindings. Alright, so then we come to number 2. And the reason why this champion is number 2 is really just because she's just generically good. Generically good and relatively easy to play most of her kit reasonably well, which is Nami. Now, Nami has come out of nowhere just mainly because of the fact that Athene's got a huge buff. I was already building Athene's on her number 1 first item. And she just handles like a lot of lanes really reasonably well. Like, she's generically good. So no matter your matchup, you're always going to have guaranteed sustain that you won't have too much trouble with. You can set up kills in the sense of you can shoot bubble, you can slow people down, and you have reasonably good disengage in case the enemy team has a ton of bruisers that are trying to run over you via the wave. So yeah. Also, she's really good because Lucian is just really good. Whenever Lucian comes back, Nami always seems to be really, really powerful. It's probably one of the best AD carry support duos. She's also really good with Kaisa, but a bit better with Lucian. It's mostly just because your E Tidecaller's Blessing, you can give it to your Lucian, and then he dashes and he shoots twice, so it procs twice. It lets him front load a ton of damage on top of the fact of win any trade. I've won lanes without even hitting bubbles, just giving the E to my Lucian, having him dash forward, and then, you know, bouncing a heal off of him. So this champion has rised a lot for me in terms of strength. Generically does everything pretty well. It's a bit hard to hit bubbles and waves, obviously, since they're slow, but overall, it just feels really, really strong and really good to play her. So for the setup for Nami, once again, we're going to be going into the sorcery tree with Summon and Aerie, and we're going to be getting Mana Flow Band just to cover your mana. After that, you can make arguments for Absolute Focus. It's completely fine to take this if you feel like you're not going to get poked a lot and you just want AP for the lane. If you care a little bit less for the lane, then Transcendence is not a bad secondary. But I've liked Absolute Focus a bit more because it just comes online a lot faster. It's a lot harder sometimes for supports to hit level 10. After that, you can go Scorch. And then in the Resolve tree, once again, just like Morgana, Bone Plating and Chrysalis, you just want to be as tanky as possible. That way you can step up early and aggressively and trade. You want to be trading your health down with the W, making sure you bounce heals. And you also want to make sure that you don't get all in and die while doing it. For itemization, it's been Spell Thieves or Coin. You can watch my video on explaining when to take Spell Thieves or Coin. But after that, I've been getting... I've been personally building tier just because their mana costs are too high, but I know a lot of people don't like that, and that's totally okay for you to not build tier. But you should probably, in most cases, build Athenes first. This item just seems really overtuned in terms of its numbers. Nami procs it really easily, just with her heal bouncing around. If you ever wave in a team fight, you'll get full stacks on it. Anytime you use bubble too, it's really good. There's just a lot of easy ways, like just playing the champion normally, to get access to Athenes on the champion. So it's just really good. Build it first, probably. If you don't build it first, it's probably because you're building the other item, which is Ardent. Ardent is really good on her because of the fact of Aerie. If you use your E on someone and your Aerie is not on cooldown, then you proc Aerie because it's considered a helpful spell, which then procs Ardent because it's a shield. So Ardent has always been really good actually on Nami if you control the Aerie very well. So whatever one you don't build first, you should probably build second. After that, you're going to round out the build with probably something like a Redemption, and then maybe a Locket afterwards if you feel like you're getting DPS too much down. For me personally, I'd have a Seraph's Embrace or an Archangel's because I would have a tier in that sense. But some kind of build like that usually looks pretty good on the champion. Alright, so then jumping into the number one champion. This champion has come up really, really hard just because of its ability to 1v9 so much, and that is Brand. There's so many bruisers and melee champions that are currently being played in the game that Brand just feels really, really, really strong. There's a lot of fighting that happens a lot of times, so you can get a ton of gold on even champions that are support. He lanes well against most champions, and even champions he doesn't lane too well against, he can front load so much damage that he can usually trade kills, and that is okay in most circumstances. Outside of that, he's just super imbalanced in the sense that his passive does percent health damage, both parts, the dot passive, but the more important thing is your 3 spell combo that explodes. It does percent health damage, so it makes taking neutral objectives really, really easy. All of a sudden, you have a support champion that does 3,000 to 5,000 damage in 2 spell cycles to Baron, and you can now do Baron way, way easier. And everyone knows right now getting Baron makes it really easy for you to close out. Yeah, so basically the development of the meta is just so many melee champions and neutral objective control that this champion just feels absolutely nuts if you do not int on it in the first 10 minutes. His base damages are just off the charts. So I know a lot of people will be kind of curious about this. Aerie versus Comet. I personally run Aerie, and the reason why I run Aerie is that you don't have spells that CC people until you get Rylai's, which is too long, or if you combo someone immediately. I've tried Comet a bunch of times, and I felt like the accuracy was under the 50% most of the games, and so I just didn't feel like that was worth taking over Airy, especially because you usually build a Leandries first, so your dot passive is 4 seconds. Leandries is going to extend that to the end. And so you're usually, if you're dotting someone and getting your passive procs off, your exploding passives, you can get 2 to 3 to 4 airy procs actually in a team fight, depending on your proximity with anyone. Plus, it feels really strong in lane, being able to just auto attack in the early stages and actually proc airy and push people out of lane. So I have settled on airy in that regard. After that, I go Mana Flow Band. Champion's just mana hungry. You don't build a mana item on it. Definitely need this. Since Celerity nerf, as we pointed out, I just go Transcendence. It rounds out your CDR a little bit better, so instead of having 10%, you usually have 20%. And then Scorch. After that, we go into the Resolve tree, as I'm a big fan of just being tanky and making sure you don't end, because your base damages are high enough that you don't really need any more damage from a tree, and I just go Bone Plating and Chrysalis, just to make sure I don't die in the laning phase. So when it comes to the builds on Brand, I'm a big fan of just getting Sorcery Shoes as soon as possible, especially with that combination of the Spell Thieves. And after that, if I get ahead, or there's healing reduction needing to be got, maybe against a Mundo or Nami, Soraka, etc., I like to get an Oblivion Orb into Morello Nomicon, depending on whether or not, if I'm ahead, I like the Oblivion Orb regardless of healing reduction, just for that double pen stacking for early snowball. But if I need the healing reduction, then I get my Morellos as soon as possible. If neither of those is a circumstance for my game, then I usually just get Leandries as soon as possible. It really synergizes well with your passive, as it causes multiple procs to burn people down. After that, we get our Rylai's, and then definitely need a Void Staff after that. If you feel like you're getting focused too much, you can also add a Zhonya's in on that. Other than that, maybe a Ludens as a last item. It rounds out your CDR pretty nicely, but I tend to get that combination later. Really, the most important thing is getting your Leandries Rylai's combo as soon as possible. And yeah, that concludes our top 5 for this 8.12. It's a hectic as crap patch. But yeah, that's it for that one. Thank you guys for watching. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and comment in the section below, and hit that bell and whistle so you can get notifications whenever new content is out. I'm Lohpally. See you guys later. Peace.